Ready. Good morning, everyone. It is October the 11th, I take that back. It is October the 18th, 2023, and it is 9:01 a.m. And I will call to order the Steering Committee of Elected Officials for Spokane County, Washington. We do have a quorum. Do we need to take an actual verbal roll with everyone?
No, we have a attendance sheet.
Okay. So we do have a quorum, and so at this time, I would ask for a motion on the minutes for the July 19th, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, minutes are approved, and now we will move to a public hearing. Thanks. Move to a public hearing for two items. The first item is the Spokane County land capacity analysis. Oh, Mr. French, please, sorry.
Yeah, no. So with regard to the poll, I heard that you're going to go off the sign-up sheet, but for those of us that are participating by Zoom, we are not there to sign up. So I'd like to be able to make sure that the record shows that we're attending.
So in attendance via Zoom, we have Commissioner Al French. We have Councilmember Dee Cragen from Deer Park. We have Councilmember Karen Stratton from City of Spokane. And is that it, or is there any other?
Voting members, yes, that's it.
Those are our other three voting members that are present via Zoom. Oh, and we have Mr. Cathcart coming in right now. So we have Commissioner Cathcart from City of Spokane attending via Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So we do have a public hearing on two items, as I said before. The first is the Spokane County land capacity analysis. Is that Mr. Chesney or some other?
Kevin, have you doing that?
I get the clicking on official.
Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, Kevin Frybot, Senior Planner for the City of Spokane. I'm here as invited by the PTAC to once again report to you and just give you an overview of the land capacity analysis or land quantity analysis recommendation. Hey, look, it works. As you recall, last year or earlier this year, the steering committee asked the PTAC to provide a recommendation for changes to the land quantity analysis, what was formerly called the land quantity analysis, in order to look at updating the factors in it, the methodology itself, and of course some of the terminology. I believe commerce was still called CTA in the document. It was that old. So as you know, the capacity analysis of some kind is a required action for the county and the cities to undertake whenever updating our comprehensive plans. Largely because it is important and required under RCW 3670A that all of our jurisdictions have sufficient capacity to meet the growth anticipated in the county. So again, in January, the SCEO asked PTAC to provide some input and a recommended methodology. PTAC met several times. Actually, a work group was formed. We met several times with folks from different jurisdictions and with the county, and also brought in experts from the county assessor's office to update the language. In July, I was here, presented to you the updated methodology that you have in your agenda packet. We received minimal comment, no changes have been made. So what you see in the packet is identical to what we discussed in July. There are some major changes. I call them major. Overall, this methodology hasn't changed that much. What we've just done is bring it up to currency with today's situation. One of the major things that we looked at was possibly vacant land. When you're identifying vacant land, formerly it was $500 or less improvement value. That's a light standard and a fence. So the recommendation is to raise that to 5,000. That doesn't mean that that property is vacant. It means it's reviewed to be vacant. It might not be vacant. Also, partially used land. Previously, we looked at any land that could be dividable into 5 or more lots, but lot sizes have shrunken since the methodology was originally written to honor that and to accommodate that. Our recommendation is to look at parcels that can be split into 8. Underutilized land still includes things like a single family home and a multifamily zone. That's underutilized. But what was added to the methodology recommendation is to also look at, for commercial and industrial land, to look at land versus improvement value. So in other words, if the land is very expensive and the improvements upon it are not very expensive, is the instructions from the methodology is to consider that that property is possibly going to redevelop within 20 years. Also, there is some updated guidance for how lands might be subtracted from capacity. The methodology has always included a step wherein you can take out public lands, you can take out lands like utility corridors or things, railroads or future roads, and you don't accept that those have residential capacity in the future. The guidance is largely the same. We've just provided some more information based on updated variables that are available on the assessor database. Also, market factor, we've discussed market factor at length at the PTAC. I know the steering committee has discussed it many times. Ultimately, our recommendation was to leave the market factor. Market factor is that off the top mathematical amount that we take out of capacity for those things we can't know. Who's going to sell? Are they likely to sell? Are they likely to redevelop? It was formerly 30%. So all the capacity, we would take 30% off the top and just say, we assume that's never going to develop, or at least not in 20 years. Our recommendation was to leave that 30% for within the UGA, but we've provided a higher market factor outside the UGA, honoring the fact that it is less likely that large lands outside the UGA will develop with urban capacities. It would require a UGA amendment and a lot more steps. And so our recommendation is to assume that half of the vacant land outside the UGA will not develop within 20 years. So those are the big changes. The minor changes, it was formerly called a land quantity analysis. We're just recommending we go with the state's language, which is land capacity. It's a simple change. Obviously, we've updated CTED to now be called the Department of Commerce. Previously, there was some language about using all 3 population scenarios, the low, medium, and high growth curves. However, that seemed not helpful, and it seemed to be a lot of work for when this body is going to determine what that assumed growth curve is. So there's a change in there to just follow the assumed growth or the adopted growth for the county. There's some additional information for how to accommodate historic development data. Several jurisdictions, the city of Spokane included, have changed our regulations recently, making it more likely that more units will be built. There's some guidance in there on how to accommodate that, knowing that change is slow. It doesn't mean tomorrow we're going to see a quadrupling of units. Obviously, we need to be able to temper that with historic data. And then there was a step which seemed out of place, which said to draw UGA boundaries as part of the land capacity analysis. That's really a separate process. That's one that's the SCEO's response, or that's your jurisdiction, not ours. When we're city staff doing capacity analysis, the capacity analysis is there to say we expect X number of people. We can accommodate X number of people, and so that step has been clarified. So it's the request that's before you today is to adopt the updated methodology. Again, it has not changed since July when we presented it. And if adopted, it would of course go forward to the Board of County Commissioners and then be appended to the end of the countywide planning policies, just like the previous methodology was. And that's it for me, unless you have any questions.
Questions? Mr. Travis.
Question here.
Oh, 1 second, let me stop sharing. Right, Alfred has a question.
Yeah, thank you. So with regard to the change in the ordinance for the city of Spokane, with the assumption that it's going to allow for increased infill development. How did you treat that in terms of the capacity analysis? Because we don't have any evidence that it's going to actually increase the density. It's a proposal, but not anything that's actually occurred yet. So how did you factor that into your equation?
So the guidance within the methodology allows each jurisdiction to make a set of assumptions on what they expect future development to be. In regards to the city of Spokane's, we haven't made that determination yet, so I couldn't tell you what the analysis will say. What the guidance in the methodology says is that that as each jurisdiction, has intimate knowledge of its own regulations and its own historic development, that each jurisdiction can kind of make an argument as to we expect this number of units or we expect this kind of change in units per acre. That allowance was in the previous methodology, is just more explicit now.
Councilmember Cathcart has his hand up.
Councilmember Cathcart?
Yeah, same question. I mean, this gives me an enormous amount of heartburn. We have not seen a ton of Boca development yet, and to suggest that we're going to make assumptions based on what ifs that we haven't actually seen, that makes me very, very worried. And I'm not so sure I can support that. My other question is 5,000 for the improvement value. How did that number get landed on? That just seems extraordinarily low to me.
I looked at the other members of the PTAC. I'm trying to recall why we landed on 5,000. I think part of it, I know we had conversations with the county assessors as far as the commercial county assessor or the larger building county assessor. Chaz, do you remember? I'm trying to recall.
I'm trying to recall as well. I mean, I definitely remember the conversations that we had with the assessor's office. I think the county ran some numbers in terms of maybe Bob.
Yeah, Bob, do you remember?
That's right. We partnered with the county's assessor's office and had them pull some data. We did a mini review and we just found that $500 was just like you were saying, it was a fence, it was a light post. And we were even getting to $5,000 and it was a shed. And so that's how we landed on the higher number.
It's also helpful to remember that that is not a hard and fast limit. That is the first run check that we use to say which parcels should we look at more carefully. There's nothing in the step that says if we find a parcel that's $5,500 of improvement value that we can't still think it's vacant. We can still say that from knowledge, local knowledge, or from review of records, we can say, you know what, there's a shed, and that shed might be falling apart, but for some reason it was $5,500 of value. A city or the county can still say, you know what, we're going to call that parcel vacant. It's more like a way of selecting out all of the parcels that we probably don't need to review. So it is like, again, it isn't a hard and fast limit. It's just a helpful tip or a helpful first step. I don't know if that helps, council member, but
yeah, it does a little. But I also think there's just a lot of other factors that we're kind of glossing over. I mean, even the size that we're looking at, if it's a shed sitting on something pretty massive, I mean, I don't know. I question what the data behind the 5,000 is. And anyway, that's just a concern.
Yeah. Council member, this is Scott Chesney. It's important to remember what Kevin was saying, though, that this is not a benchmark determination, it's a filter. It's a way of looking at parcels and identifying a group of parcels that then would be looked at individually through aerials or even street, windshield surveys as to whether or not they're vacant or ready for redevelopment. So it's not a hard and fast, determination. And secondly, you mentioned the first part. In the methodology, individual communities will have to defend their projections based on historic development patterns, not just a presumption that we can absorb this much in the infill. And that's obviously a bigger factor for the two bigger cities, but it has to look at the basis of, in the case of the city of Spokane, The centers and corridors zoning has been there for a long time, but the development patterns don't show that it's accomplished its projections. So the city will have to determine and defend any projections that seem like they're going to absorb a lot of infill development and say, how can we think this is possible because we haven't done it in the past? And I'm not trying to cast a negative pall on this, but that development history was a big factor in this methodology. It's like you need to be able to demonstrate that you have the capacity and the willingness to make this happen, not just that it looks good on paper.
Well, who are they defending it to? Is it to the GMA steering board as a whole?
It will be to the steering committee as a whole, and that steering committee then, of course, the steering committee will make that recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay.
Director. And incidentally, that is what happened last time as well. Is we used historic data to provide an argument for we expect so many units in centers and corridors zoning, even though it was based on historic information reality rather than the maximum allowed within the zone. I don't think anyone would argue that the maximum capacity of the zone is expected it's historically or in the future.
So, hey, Kevin, can I just follow up real quick then on that note? If we are looking at history, I mean, we definitely significantly overprojected in the last LQA. So would that be taken into account in terms of our new projections, the fact that we overprojected the last time?
When you say overprojected, are you referring to the OFM population projections or our ultimate
number of units?
The number of possible units in the LCA, that was following the methodology last time, so I'm not sure.
But that's my point. My point is we were following the methodology and overprojected. So how will we change knowing that history?
I would suggest that we're starting from a clean slate, but it does mean that that each city putting together a projection will have to defend that and look critically at their past development patterns and say, yes, we had this pattern in place. No, we didn't achieve the densities we wanted there. Therefore, the ability to say we can do that now is going to be based on, I guess, a different perspective, and it will have to be defended to the steering committee.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple of follow-up questions with regard to methodology. As I mentioned in one of our previous meetings, a number of developments, particularly in the city, but throughout the county, have deed restrictions with regard to single-family use. And so when you do your capacity analysis, are you going to be looking for those deed restrictions and where they apply and where they don't apply so that we make sure that we haven't overestimated? So that's one question. Do you want me to ask the second question now, or do you want me to? Okay, the second question is.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, that's great. If you got an answer, that's terrific.
The vast majority of deed, at least as far as my awareness in the city of Spokane, the vast majority of deed restrictions also tend to be located in the same place as planned unit developments or PUDs. Any vested development, like a PUD instrument that says they are vested for so many units, that overrides any discussion of vacancy or underutilization. Under the methodology we use, what the PUD was adopted to allow. So if they came in for a PUD for 1,000 units and then deed restricted that area, obviously we won't assume that they can do many more than that because the PUD itself is a limiting factor. Where we know of deed restrictions, that is absolutely possible to factor into the total numbers.
So I would ask that you use both methodologies, but I'll give you a great example. The original plat and approval for Eagle Ridge was for 2,300 lots. It only built out 1,200. So yes. You have an overshot of 1,100 units that did not and cannot be built. But then in addition to that, in the deed restriction CC&Rs, it also restricts to single family homes. So that's a good example of how you need to mirror up all of those different elements. The other thing is the cost. I know that, and I'll just share, and I've got 2 parcels that I've been trying to convert from single family to triplexes, and the cost for extending water, I've got to run a new water line, a new sewer line, new electrical, and all of those other additional costs. And the sewer line in the city is an old sewer line and it wasn't designed to handle the additional capacity. So are you taking those factors into consideration when you're looking at this, or is that assumed that ultimately be paid for by the developer, property owner, whoever's going to journey forth?
The methodology itself allows for any data source or information like that a jurisdiction wants to include. Furthermore, as a second consideration too, when looking at, for instance, compliance with HB 1110 from last year, or 1220 when we talked about housing capacity, those bills and the guidance coming out of Commerce, we expect will also allow adjustment for things like infrastructure capacity, depending again on the jurisdiction and how they want to handle that. But there's nothing that I'm aware of. I'm looking at my colleagues. There's nothing I'm aware of in the methodology that would prohibit a city from saying this area it might have the land, but it doesn't have the infrastructure capacity. So we're going to assume a lower capacity. Scott Gupta's got his hand up. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Scott Gupta, the Department of Commerce. I'm the senior planner, provides technical assistance to Spokane County. Just a couple of points. One thing is that we also need to think about this as a regional growth policy. These are individual cities that are looking at their growth capacity under a common methodology where everybody's coordinated. But we're also thinking about what is the regional growth policy, and the county can also think about, what policies will be in place to accommodate growth. And I'm thinking, rural capacities and those kind of issues. That's one point. The other point is the Growth Management Act now requires a 5-year check-in. So however this washes out, whatever the policies that are adopted, methodologies, capacities, potentially new urban growth boundaries or not, those are we're required to have a 5-year check-in. And then that will tell us, how things are working, and it'll provide an opportunity for adjustments. So I'm gonna make a couple of those points.
And then Commissioner French, you had a second question? Do we lose him?
No, I asked 2 questions, and that was my limit.
Oh, okay. I wanted to make sure I caught it.
Yeah.
Is the capital facilities plan most jurisdiction to a 6-year capital facilities plan? You're looking at a 20-year plan. Are you looking out far enough on the capital facilities as far as infrastructure needs further than 20 years?
Well, I can only speak to the city of Spokane. Our capital facilities plan is a 20-year capital facility plan, and then we do a 6-year CIP for the actual construction.
Okay.
So yeah, that is a required step of the comprehensive planning update that'll be due in 2026.
On the higher market factor for outside the UGA, how'd you decide on 50%? Because I mean, I would think that would kind of come down to, how do you define develop land? Because what we see over and over and over outside the UGA is someone buys a 10-acre parcel of land, they landscape, and they put the house on 1 acre of the 10. So, that's 10% of their property that's actually quote unquote developed. So how do you land on 50%?
I can't say overall it was similar to the 5,000. It was just from a discussion of the room. The market factor is difficult because it is intended to catch all of the unquantifiable things by using a quantifiable number. So it is by nature a guess. It's a scientific guess. But I would defer to my colleagues at the county, since that is definitely within their wheelhouse, not the city of Spokane.
To me, that seems like a low number. When you look at what's, people, I don't know, 50 I know sounds like a big number, but when you look at what is actually quote unquote developed, 50 doesn't seem high enough.
No, and I think it's again, it's sort of a filter rather than a hard and fast benchmark. As we do this analysis, we'll look at those parcels, we'll look at the certificate of exemption process that allows those carve outs without a subdivision. And it'll also be a factor as we go through 24, what's our UGA going to look like and how is that going to affect parcels that are outside of that UGA now? If that boundary changes, then that 50%, may end up being by dumb luck accurate. But it's really a benchmark to start investigating on a hard and fast filter.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, Director Chesney, is that market factors have taken off after you've made all those other considerations that you know about. So, steep slopes, wetlands, you can take all of that out, the things that are limiting development, and then the market factors at the end, you then chop up half of it again, just to cover the things you can't know. So it is, yeah.
And I believe I saw in there about valuation, because we have a lot of 10-acre parcels right adjacent to the urban growth boundary that are very high valued properties. That is deducted. The county would consider those as deducted properties from available.
Right. I'll defer to Kevin for the specifics, but the idea was just because it looks like a developable parcel, if it's a 10-acre parcel with a $2 million property on it, that's not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, that's my biggest concern for Spokane.
Yeah, we had some properties in the city of Spokane as well with very valuable homes on large lots. And there is language in the methodology to allow, us to assume, the mansion on Rockwood with the acre parcel is not going to put a 5-unit apartment building back there. They're just not going to do that. So there's the capability within the methodology to make those calls when necessary.
Other questions from the group or in the ether?
It is a public hearing, so
no, we'll open that up.
Okay.
Terrific. Thank you very much, everybody.
Oh, Commissioner French has.
The last question for Commissioner French.
Just one last question. One last question. I've hit my limit. So the market factor that we've had before, we are not changing the market factor. We're just being more specific with regard to the land capacity analysis. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah. Within the UGA, the market factor has not changed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any last questions?
Thank you very much.
All right. So at this time, this is a public hearing. So prior to asking the steering committee for a recommendation, I will open the public hearing at 9:29 a.m. And do we have anybody who wishes to make comments regarding the land capacity analysis methodology as presented to this group?
So far, no one has their hand raised.
Second call for public comments.
Oh,
in the room.
Oh, in the room, please.
Did I go up there or stay here?
Why don't you come on up here?
Well. But I'll talk while I walk.
If you could identify yourself for the record.
Well, gonna do that. My name is Paul Kropp. I live in the unincorporated urban growth area known as Moran Prairie, Spokane, Washington, 99203-3311 East Aurora Court. The PTAC and the county planning staff are to be complimented for this update. It's cogent. It makes sense. You understand it. You can ask questions. That's all a good thing. I would kind of share the rural 50% query as well, but there it is. I would go for a 2/3 rather than 50%, but that's just, an individual. For the sake of clarity, however, for the public, I think to see that this document ought to have a slightly different title because it really addresses capacity for population growth. It's a little, documents like this are a little bit inside baseball. And so they don't really always reflect to a general audience what they're aimed to do. So I just leave this on the table. I'm a member of the public, I would call it Spokane County Land Capacity Methodology for Population Growth. Other than that, good job, thank you.
Any other public comments from individuals in the room? Any other public comments from those remotely? Seeing or hearing no more public or no other persons moving toward public comment, I will close the public hearing at 9:31. And at this time, I would look to the steering committee for a recommendation on this on the land capacity analysis methodology as presented.
So
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion from the group? Any discussion, any comments or discussion from anyone remotely? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, this group moves to recommend this methodology to the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you very much. So now we'll move to the next item, which is the comp plan amendment CPA 1723.
I want to compliment Councilmember Cathcart for working on the fly to get here. Coming in the door. That was the benefit of technology. It's great. We have before you today the second part of what we've briefed you in the past. This is a comprehensive plan amendment in the sense that it's something that must go through that CPA process by the Growth Management Act. It was not proposed by an individual developer. It is a result of the settlement agreement. You can see here that we had a number of comp plan amendments come through the county. We previewed those with you way back in the first part of the year. There were 8 plus 2. This is one that is that reconciliation or urban growth area correction. Just for everyone and for the record, this is the calendar that the county follows to do this. You can see we are there at the second or the penultimate step with the steering committee. Your recommendation, should you choose to make one, will go to the Board of County Commissioners on November 7th with the rest of the comp plan amendment package. You can see in the metro area, here's where the plan amendments were located this year, all of which are pretty much our usual suspects: West Plains, the North Wandermere Mead area, and one in the South Valley UGA. This was the list of them, ranging from very small, 1.5 acres, up to this one, which is 88, and others 20 and 30 acres. Some conversions of light industrial, but also mostly higher density residential conversions, which are fairly typical in these last few years. So here's where we stand. These are the 2 plats you can see outlined in yellow. 5 Mile Prairie, immediately adjacent to the city of Spokane. They were an anomaly from the mid-2000s when they were applied to county building and planning and accepted at that time, but then no effort was made on those for a number of years. My predecessor, John, wrote a determination that they had expired, and that determination then was used to essentially set them aside during the discussions of the settlement agreement, where the county declared all of the areas that were in urban areas that should have been in a UGA. So these were left off that list. If you've seen the settlement agreement, it has about 30 pages at the back part of it that are exhibits of all of the other subdivisions and places that were discussed in that agreement. The developer, however, brought this back to the Spokane County hearing examiner in 21. The hearing examiner found that rather than being an expired plat, since no action had been taken, but since the county had accepted what we would call a counter complete application, that application was live and had vested. When we declared that to FutureWise and the plaintiffs group during our latest round of mediation talks in 21, FutureWise was not happy. They considered that the county had been deceptive in not declaring this in the past, and we had to say we didn't think we did because our predecessor said it had expired and now it's back to life through no effort of the county itself. So we found ourselves in that rock and a hard place situation. The plats are live, they're being developed, but they are not in an urban growth area. It makes no sense that they are in that sense. They are going to be in urban densities. They should be in an urban growth area. And you can see the aerial here pretty clear. So what the county did, there were two options in a sense. One is we could have tried to declare that just by sheer common sense, these should be in an urban growth area, regardless of a UGA analysis, and drawn the boundary around them, declare victory and go home. What we decided to do, though, was to respect the parts of the settlement agreement that said the county was not allowed to change the urban growth area until the 2026 update specifically. So what we looked at was the 2016 land quantity analysis, which had population growth allocations assigned to a number of parcels for future development. You can see here, these were parcels that were set aside, or I'm sorry, were accommodated for future population growth, but had changed ownership in some way to make that unlikely, if not impossible. Purchased by a Vista, by the city, by the county, and taken out of that capacity for urban development. So we said, well, there's a population number there that we can reassign to these plats. We came close, within about 6 or 7%, and we thought, given the normal margin of error, that seems like a reasonable group of population. So those parcels were in a sense decreased to a 0 population projection, and that moved over on this side. That left us with an acreage calculation. I'm sorry, you can see a few of them here that have changed in that 2016 piece. The acreage part, again, with the idea that the county was not allowed to expand the UGA boundary, is can we find comparable acreage to take out of the UGA and shift it over to these plats? We decided to use the Memorial Gardens and Cemetery, which are not going to develop, but are in the UGA. They are served at the edges by water and sewer, so there's that to be considered. But we decided we could shift that acreage over to these, and there's a difference in acreage from about 210 to the 88 acres needed over here. So what we did was make those 2 adjustments to move that forward. Comments from FutureWise suggest that they don't agree with that strategy. The city was also not entirely supportive of it, but said they didn't have enough time to review and were still considering that. And the Neighborhood Alliance agreed again that it was not in the spirit of the Growth Management Act. We put this forward to our planning commission with the sense, again, back to that rock, hard place. If we do nothing, we are admitting that we're doing urban development outside of an urban growth area. The county is out of compliance. You know, we've been working to get back in compliance these last couple of years. That's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot. If we take this action, it may be challenged through litigation, but we're comfortable that we can at least defend that we've taken the spirit of the UGA and Growth Management Act to try to fix something that is not necessarily a planning directive. It's not something that we put out there by ourselves. So we call it a corrective action rather than a UGA swap. But because it does involve the urban growth area, we are before you to ask for your consideration and a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. The Spokane County Planning Commission did agree to this last week unanimously, and so for what that's worth, you can look at their participation. But we are looking for an action by this group as a recommendation to the county board. So.
Could you just clarify why was the population assigned to a cemetery to begin with?
No, there was no population assigned to the cemetery.
Okay.
That was one of the first things we thought of is, well, let's just do the acreage swap because we did it, but when we looked at the 2016 LQA, there was 0 population at time assigned to the cemetery, so we had to look for those other parcels that had population assigned to them.
Okay.
So the cemetery is an acreage swap. The other parcels were a population swap.
Okay, that helps. And then, could you also clarify, my understanding was the agreement, with FutureWise wasn't just a date certain, but also a population growth, piece. And I thought we had exceeded that threshold, but correct me if I'm wrong.
That's accurate. There were what were called triggers. And the county did meet those triggers in 21 or with the 22 population.
So theoretically, then why would you need to swap if we met those triggers?
From our perspective, this seemed like a less legally challenging approach than having to go through a full-blown urban growth analysis, which is what we're doing now and in 24, just to justify these plats. It seemed like we could make this correction outside of that actual analysis, because we would have had to have done the full-blown, almost 1 or 2 year process had we decided to use the triggers to move forward.
So it just seems like, based on the comments, the concern from FutureWise is more about the date, and they're not talking about population. And it sounds like that might be a factor that would negate their argument that this is a violation of state law.
It could be, and the other part is this will certainly be considered as part of the UGA analysis for the 26 periodic update. The reason we're asking for the action now is we're very close to getting the county back into compliance with the Growth Management Act, and we don't want to wait another 2.5 years to do that.
Okay.
And for those of you that may not know this, the compliance or the out of compliance is not just an administrative, slap on the wrist. It prevents the county from receiving funds from anything that the State Public Works Board administers. This year alone, that Public Works Board has $400 million to allocate to projects around the state. The county is leaving that on the table by being out of compliance. That's money that can help stormwater management, it can help water quality, it can help our citizens. And so this is not just an academic exercise. It's like we want to get back in compliance so we can use some of these funds for our growth and development.
Other questions for Mr. Chesney?
You're looking for a motion?
No.
We have the public hearing.
Oh,
I do have a question. It's Karen Stratton. My
Go ahead.
question is, so I'm looking at the letter that the city wrote to the county regarding this and their concerns that they haven't had enough time. There's some specific things that they call out. Has that been dealt with? Has the city and the county come together and talked about these problems to look where we might meet somewhere in the middle of this? Or
this has been out there for actually quite a while. We were a little disappointed in that response from the city. However, I've been in touch with Spencer, and we are getting together tomorrow or Monday to consider the city's perspectives, at least have something to be able to share with the Board of County Commissioners on Tuesday when they're briefed. But no, it's not been resolved.
Thank you.
Add to my understanding that the letter is not in your packet for this agenda, but county staff told me that it is online on the web page.
In the file folder for CP 1723.
I could read the letter to you, or we could try to mail it out.
Go ahead.
So, hello, I'm Carol Black, City of Spokane Planning. So this letter was written for the County Planning Commission hearing on this matter. And the date is October 10th. Dear Mr. Brock, Bob Brock, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the revised CPA 1723 concerning an urban growth area correction north and west of the incorporated city boundaries. The city is commenting both as an adjacent jurisdiction and as a provider of urban services to both locations, as both the area to be added to the UGA and the area to be subtracted from the UGA are within a retail water service area and sewer service area. The city of Spokane has not requested any UGA correction. As Mr. Chesney mentioned, so this is not in the letter, but we are not a party to the settlement agreement. Removal of properties that are currently served with urban services should be undertaken with great care and attention to potential impacts. It is possible that future expansion and maintenance of these areas would be impacted as the city's comprehensive plan prohibits the city from providing services outside of the UGA except in limited services. On September 18th, Mr. Frybot notified both the county and Mr. Warwick that the city couldn't adequately determine the potential impacts of UGA correction on our systems and services, as the county had still not made clear what specific parts of the UGA would be impacted. So we were notified that they wanted to do this amendment, but there was a lot of discussion about where the subtraction would be made. Mr. Frybot reiterated our request for the specifics on September 19th, 2023. However, it was not until the hearing notice and SEPA were issued on September 27th, 2023 that we were informed specifically which parcels were proposed to be removed from UGA. Accordingly, the city has had very little time to prepare comments and was unable to provide input on the SEPA environmental checklist items related to services provided by the city in advance of the issuance of the DNS. Given our abbreviated analysis, we strongly recommend that the county hold this proposal until the next cycle to allow for sufficient time for the county and the city to consider the impacts of this proposal. With that in mind, please consider the following preliminary comments. I believe there are 5 of them. So the first one is because the city as service provider was not informed of the parcels to be removed from the UGA, we request that the county rescind the SEPA determination to allow for additional time for the city to determine impacts. The SEPA checklist cannot have adequately considered impacts of the water and sewer system that already serve this location as the city is the service provider. And then we made note in number 2 that there's some small discrepancy in the parcels, that maybe one was missed that in the center of this proposal. The third item, while we understand that the area to be removed from the UGA is entirely owned by cemeteries, the county environmental checklist and staff report should note that these parcels are already provided with urban scale services and utilities by the city of Spokane. These parcels to be removed from the UGA. That would not reduce the need for water and sewer service in these properties. This most significant where water is concerned is landscaping, water, primary use of the cemetery is by far the largest water demand on our system. The city cannot recommend removing parcels from the UGA that are already served by urban services and will continue to be so in the future. The fourth one is while the majority of the Greenwood Memorial Park is developed as a cemetery, the northern portion of the property remains vacant and unused. So that's specific to parcels 25143, 9009 and 25154, 9037. The county may wish to consider whether it's prudent to remove this area from potential future development. And then we also made some comments about the Avista properties to the west and the Beacon Hill area properties, which you're just having the staff report as removing the population count. We just want to clarify that we don't have any problem with that, but we would not want those areas removed from the urban. And
yeah, I would just say, I mean, unless based on the information from our staff, I would be inclined to suggest we should defer this decision. If there's urgency around it, maybe we could set up a special meeting in November to determine that. But I'm not sure that I'd be prepared at this time, given the question from our staff on this. And
I did just see my email this morning that there is a meeting with like next week on the staff level between the county and the city. That's it for me. Sorry, I got reading. That's painful.
Scott, you said this went through the county planning commission?
Correct.
What was their vote?
5-0 in favor.
Okay.
and we have great respect for our city partners in this. I think we've established over these last few years a renewed partnership in development through this group, through the PTAC, and we want to do nothing to diminish that. However, there is a sense of urgency with this. This is one of those remaining pieces that the county needs to get back in compliance. If it ideally would go with the comprehensive plan amendments this year, which would be briefed to the board next week with the board's anticipated action November 7th. So there's a little bit of time that we might be able to resolve some of the staff issues between the city and the county before it is poised to the commissioners for action. However, I will certainly concede that this is not an ideal approach. We are, in fact, I hate to use it again, the rock and the hard place. No matter what the county does, there's a potential challenge for this. We do feel, though, that some action is easier to defend than by not taking any action at all and simply admitting that we're going to be out of compliance until this is taken care of in 2026. That does not seem like an appropriate role for us to take. And I think we're better off taking some action and defending it, even if it's not ideal.
So we'll go with Ms. Waldrop, please.
Well, I mean, my immediate reaction was supporting what Councilman Cathcart was saying. This is the first time I've seen a letter from the city. I didn't realize that there were concerns. I saw the FutureWise letter 2 days ago. So I have questions about if the county, as a county commissioner, I would like to see some answers to. I don't see any responses to the comments here from your staff. So I need a little bit more understanding before I would feel comfortable, you know, taking a position. But if others want to take a position today, I would probably have to vote in against, because I just don't understand what some of the implications would be to take a piece out the cemeteries. You know, it sounded like a good idea to me when it was briefed several months ago, but there are these water and sewer considerations. And I think I just need a little bit more information about what that means in terms of being consistent with our policies and with our other jurisdictions' policies.
Understood. It's certainly our thought that those would be considered within the 2026 analysis, and frankly within the UGA analysis that's underway right now. We see this as a necessary band-aid, but a band-aid to be sure.
Can I just ask one question?
Go ahead.
Did the Plan Commission get all of the letters from the
Yes.
city and the FutureWise? Okay.
Yes, they did.
Please,
Joel.
Well, the city, given that they're getting the water usage on the, and this is the side conversation, I guess. Just curious, the city is not getting general facility charges or any impact fees for the current use. They're charging the water utility fees for the memorial area. If these were put into place, they would get new general facility charges and also for water sewer usage on those, any permitted use on those new parcels that come in the city. They're not built yet, or if they're previously built, then that would be a different issue. And impact fees as well. So those are in place as the city approved, they put those in place. So there would be growth opportunities within those areas that they would have, but they're built out to provide services that they need.
I think that's a reasonable presumption, yes.
But just something to consider.
So just a couple questions. I realize as the chair, it's kind of odd, but so if this does not go through this cycle, we are then out of compliance for another year, correct?
Potentially. This is also tied to ongoing litigation, which does give us the opportunity to take it off cycle. So if it were deferred today, the Board of County Commissioners can consider the recommendation with no recommendation from the steering committee, but it could also defer it into 24. The first meeting or two of the steering committee could happen. So it would not necessarily, it would be deferred to 24, for sure. It would not necessarily be in the 24 amendment cycle, which is typically all the way out to where we are here, October, November.
So does the county then, if it is deferred until 24, do we miss out? Does the county miss out on funding for 2024? because we are still out of compliance?
I think that would depend on how quickly it was changed, this was adopted. And the funding cycle from the Public Works Board, which I don't know. I would guess if we're out of compliance when that board sets its 24 or 25 or 26 projects, we will still be ineligible.
So by not taking action, we have the potential to miss out on significant funding from the Public Works Board, if the potential. And we also have the ability to then address these particular issues in the 26 cycle for GMA updates, correct?
We do. However, I don't want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that we are losing money specifically because of this. We're ineligible because we're totally out of compliance. This is one step to get back into compliance and do that. The faster we do that, the better. But there's no request from our environmental services or public works group to saying, get here, we've got this grant application, we're ready to go forward, we need $10 million. There's no imminent pending impact of that. It's just simply we're not eligible to participate. If we move it to 24, if we move it quickly into 24, that's probably the best fallback position. But again, it's not going to necessarily change this approach. We may have to look for a different system. We may have to consider a different acreage of some kind, but you know, our folks spent hard looking through the entire county to see if they could find 88 acres, and this was the best alternative of, you know, I guess the least objectionable alternative we could find to bring before you.
Any other questions for Mr. Chesney? So I guess at this time, before we open the public hearing, I guess I would ask this group, is there any desire to hold this for clarification or collaboration between county and city to address some of these concerns from the city? I doubt we could address FutureWise's concerns because they are FutureWise's concerns, neighborhood alliance things. But if there are issues that have to do with water and sewer and taking things in and out of GMA, is that something that this board, is there any interest from this board in saying we would then come back in November or at the very beginning of 2024 and see that then? Mr. Cathcart.
Yeah, I don't know if we need a motion, but I would support a short deferral for that to take place.
And I would support that too.
So is there anyone who does not support that? Is there anyone here today who wishes to see this acted on today? Anyone?
Well, the option to deferral is if you're not raising your hand or whatever. I mean, we got to deal with emotions on it. Did you make a motion?
I did not yet. So.
We don't have a motion. What I didn't want to do is if we're just going to defer this, I didn't want to open the public hearing yet. That's what I'm trying to get a sense of.
Well, this was scheduled for a public hearing. I intended to vote on it. This has gone through our planning commission, unanimously approved. I'm comfortable with moving forward.
All right, so and Commissioner French.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Kearns. You know, if we were to defer this, I would encourage us not to go beyond November. Let's find a time in November to come back and reconvene and address this. Whenever we're standing in the way of bringing resources to this county, that's not a good decision and stuff. So certainly I'm prepared to vote on it today, but if a deferral is going to be the will of the body, then let's do it in November and not drag this out.
So So Commissioner Cathcart, or Councilmember Cathcart, sorry.
I will move that we defer to the first available date in November.
Second.
Moved and seconded, but now the question is, so we're just looking for a deferral, so I won't open the public hearing yet. So I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion to defer until November?
Can I ask, the letter didn't make it around here, what, and I'm sorry, I missed when you said, when was the information given to the city?
See if I still have it.
I thought that was referenced in there.
It was late September.
Late September, so.
I do not have
September 18th, so a month ago. There wasn't time to review, but there was time to draft a letter to tell us that you didn't have time to review.
The letter was up in October.
The letter was sent to us in October, but the information, it just worked its way around here. So you didn't have time to review the information, but this indicates on September 18th, you were notified by both the county that the city couldn't adequately determine the potential impact. So you had it prior to September 18th to make a decision on September 18th that you didn't have time to review it. And then you waited 3 weeks to send the letter that you didn't have time to review this. So a lot of time was spent not doing anything. And I mean, poor time management doesn't create a problem for me. That's your problem. I'm comfortable with moving forward and voting on this today.
Can I answer some of what some of your
If you'd
questions
like.
here, if it's appropriate?
Please.
Okay, so September 18th, we made the request to discuss it, but we did not receive the parcels that would be removed, the actual area that would be removed from the UGA until the hearing notice for the Plan Commission was issued. So that was what, 14 days before, that's when the SEPA was issued and the hearing notice. That was the time, and then there was the letter itself was to the Planning Commission regarding their hearing, which was coming, it was the 11th, I'd say, I can't remember what the day was. Is it October? For the Planning Commission meeting? October 12th. But 12th. So that's when the letter refers to a short period of time. That's the period of time that it's talking about.
Okay.
Okay, but today is October 18th. Has not been time to review these? You had said 14 days prior to the Planning Commission.
Nothing's changed.
So everything's just been that nobody has taken the time to review this yet.
Well, we have made comments about, well, we're sympathetic to the county's problem, but we're not sure that removing this area from the UGA doesn't just create other problems for the property owner. And it makes a strange UGA shape on that west side of the city. So.
Okay.
So I'll move to Commissioner Cathcart, and then I will ask for a vote on the motion that is currently before us. So, Councilman Cathcart.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, our plan department is definitely understaffed and has a lot, is over capacity in a lot of ways. And so I know they're working their butts off to do these things and provide these analyses and get the feedback, but it does take a little bit of time. We have a lot going on right now in the city. And so I just think we have some huge decisions to make before this body in the next couple of years. And that collaboration between the city, the county, all the other jurisdictions, I think is going to be pretty critical to being successful in those big decisions. And this is just kind of a real small one. It does appear to be a common sense thing, but at the end of the day, I need to hear from my staff some of the details that they have not yet had the chance to dig through. So I think this is a reasonable request, and I do think that it's something that would lend itself well to just our future working relationships within this body.
So before this body, Councilmember Woodward.
So the question I would have is, if we defer, and we're gonna try to do it early in November, is 3 weeks gonna be enough time, 4 weeks? Or is it gonna stretch out to 6 and 7 to the very end of November? which we have some holidays in there, we've got an election in there, we've got a lot of things going on in November already that are going to limit the ability to get together as a group, at least with the voting number of people, assumably. I just think that's got to be taken into consideration as well. And it has gone through planning, of course, county planning commission, not yours. But I think that in my experience being on planning commissions, as well as listening to and talking to a lot of planning commissioners, I think that more often than not, we have to defer because they've had time to deliberate, talk about, make motions, do the things that they need to do. So I would rather not defer.
So, Mr. Chesney.
In just looking at logistics, yeah, I mean, I agree with Councilmember Cathcart in terms of repeating our partnership. We brought this to you because this is your last scheduled meeting of the year. There is that sense of urgency. We feel that we've had this conversation with the city, at least informally, for quite a while before they had their formal notice. At least director to director, we've had that discussion. So we thought, again, because this is not an ideal situation, we thought it was right for a decision today. That said, if this body is willing to meet in one of the first 2 Wednesdays of November, virtually or anyways, we can get a quorum. This does not have to go anywhere past this committee. It will go straight to the Board of County Commissioners, and we can include that at their say December 5th meeting, which would be one of their 2 last meetings of the year. If we're not able to do it, say that first or second week in November at the steering committee level, this will get pushed into 2024. But it is possible to do that while not the most desirable, and it would require the special meeting. If the steering committee is willing to commit to a quorum, we can still get this done this year. But we do recognize that's a challenge and an added burden for all of you as well.
So before
this is Karen Stratton. I would just ask our planning staff, does that timeline work? I know I agree with Councilmember Cathcart. Everybody is in your department is running full speed. Does that give you enough time? If we defer this, does that give you enough time to look at this and have the conversations you need to make?
Carol Black again, City Spokane Planning. I'm not sure that the city would change their comments given more time. We still serve water and sewer in this area. It's part of the UGA. It's going to be removed.
But Cyril, the whole letter was about the questions that we haven't had a chance to dig into. I assume once we dig in.
Yeah, we could do more. And we have not had an opportunity to have a conversation with the cemetery property owners as well. I don't know what the county staff has conversation with them about what their future plans are and how that affects them. So I'm not aware of that.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
The parcels that were identified to be pulled out of the UGA do not have pipes in the ground that are served by the city of Spokane. It is in their service area boundary. We are not arguing that, but the area does not have actual physical pipes in the ground running to the city sewer system. Additionally, if this area was pulled out and there was some sort of need for sewer there, the county's critical areas ordinance would regulate the sewage disposal type that portion of now outside the UGA could do, which would be 90 acres or 90 gallons per minute per acre per day of sewage disposal that they could do, and it could be done on an on-site approved by the health district sewer disposal system. So I just wanted to clarify that part, and from the county's perspective of why these parts were identified. So that's all I had to say.
All right, so before us, we have a motion that has been made by Councilmember Cathcart and seconded. That motion is to defer consideration by this board of this CPA that is before us. That motion did not have a date certain to defer to. So I would look to Councilmember Cathcart, do you wish to assign a date certain to which we would defer to?
If there's a preferable date, I would assign it to that date.
November 8th.
All right, so for the purposes of this motion that is on the table, we are asking this group, is there, the motion is to defer consideration of CPA 1723 until a special meeting of this group on November the 8th, 2023. All in favor of deferral, please say aye.
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 All, so we have three, I heard 3 ayes. Are there any more ayes? All opposed to deferral, please say no.
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 Can we have a show of hands real quick? So we have, let's see.
Commissioner French.
We have Commissioner French. Anyone else? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ms. Cragen.
I got the
Dee, do you have a vote on this?
just trying to get her technical guy there.
Tell her she needs to mute herself.
Yeah, do you need to unmute yourself? Hey Dee, if I'll ask you, is it aye, put your hand up, or is it nay, put your hand up?
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Ms. Cragen, are you in favor of this motion or opposed?
Yes, I am in favor. Sorry,
Okay, so
I was muted.
So you are in favor of deferring?
Yes.
Okay, so that's 4 to 5. So the motion to defer is defeated. I would vote, as the voting member, I would vote to not defer. So I am voting nay against that. So now, because we are not deferring, I will now open the public hearing for CPA 1723. Are there any members of the public who wish to make comments on CPA 1723 as presented? Anyone in remote? Please raise your hand if you wish to make a comment. Second call for comments, either in the audience or via remote. Third and final call. Do we see any?
None.
All right, so I will now close the public hearing, and it was open about a minute, so we're closing the public hearing at 10:14. And at this time, I would look for this body for a motion on CPA 1723 as presented.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion from this body? Mr. Cathcart.
Yeah, I'll just say, I mean, I don't think my vote's needed based on the vote of the deferral, but I would probably be inclined to support this with the deferral and some more time to get those details, but without that, and no other option, I'll be voting that.
Ms. Walker.
Similarly, I just need some more information from my own planning staff at the county around, legal implications of some of these concerns and a response. So I'll be voting no, but I may be in support if I can get more information in the future.
Mr. Wayne.
Wouldn't there be time for the city to bring comments to the Board of County Commissioners for their hearing? Because the county commissioners will have an opportunity to also review this as well. So there would be time for the city to provide comment to the county commissioners. I don't think, I'm not a voting member, so that's just something to consider.
And just to reinforce that, we have a meeting at least tentatively scheduled to have that conversation directly related to this letter. We made that offer to the city's planning director as soon as he received the letter and said, we know we're all busy. We've got the next 2 Fridays. If we could squeeze it in, we're still looking at maybe something this Friday or even Monday as an initial step that we can then use to brief the commissioners when we brief them on Tuesday. But the commissioners won't be asked to act on this until November 7th. So there's time to receive more comments.
Any other comments or discussion from the group? So at this time, I would ask for a vote on recommending CPA 1723 to the Board of County Commissioners. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
Okay.
Nay.
3 nays. We have 3 nays. So
Dean.
she said aye. She did say aye. So at this point, at this time, the board approves recommending CPA 1723 to the Board of County Commissioners for consideration at their November meeting. Thank you all very much. Appreciate you all participating through the process. Ms. Woodard.
Mr. Chair, do we need to take an action on the review and approval of the minutes?
We did that.
We did that?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. Thank you.
All right, so that concludes our action. Is that our action items for today? You still more? No, that's it. We're done with action items, so now we're in our workshop. We're moving on to the coordinated water system plan update and partnerships, Mr. Chesney.
Thank you. And just to follow up, we will make sure that the PTAC and the steering committee receives information, any new information that the county and city put together on that comp plan amendment as soon as we have it. And if there are concerns from any of you, please call me or my office, and we will relay those to the Board of County Commissioners. This item is before you. The coordinated water system plan is a document that all of us are a part of. It has not been updated in more than 20 years. We are proposing to update this as part of the 26 comprehensive plan updates that we are all doing, but also finding that many of discrete elements from the various capital facilities to water to other things, to park, to a lot of things that are supposed to be considered within that umbrella of comprehensive planning have been left in their own silos for a long time. The water system plan is one of those. What we intend to do with this is update the details of that. We're not necessarily changing or recommending changes in service areas as much as capacities, water rights issues, capacity to serve, pipes in the ground, because in many cases, those water districts, those special districts are directly impacted by growth decisions in our urban growth area. And it also ties into that capital facilities program. We feel this is a fairly straightforward amendment, but what we're proposing, we wanted to get your feedback, is most of us, or all of us that are planning under the Growth Management Act, are receiving funding for that 26 plan update. We would like to set aside some share of that funding, 5% or some modest part of that from the various elements that participate in the water plan, to use that to engage consultants or some professional, some subject matter expert to update the technical details of that plan. We are hoping that seems like a reasonable approach to do this. And we're simply looking at your thoughts of whether or not that kind of partnership might be supported by your constituencies. We don't have any more details to that. It's just really a first step of opening that door.
But you believe 5% would cover the cost?
I think so, and it may not even be that much. Because we don't see this is as much a technical document as it says it's a plan, but it's really a technical document of what districts have, how they distribute it, what do they have in the bank, paper water versus wet water. And it seems to me that that's a fairly straightforward technical assessment. And I guess the sense today is, yeah, let's talk about a 5% commitment, and if we start doing an RFP and find out that it's a different one, we would come back and talk to everybody and say, here's what we found. It's more about the willingness to participate, you know, both time and financial.
I will just say that as a member of the Spokane County Water Conservancy Board and City of Millwood, I know of smaller water systems that are under moratorium already. We really, in this area, we need to get a handle on what we have for wet water, paper water. We're going to have particularly some jurisdictions are going to have a fight on their hand for inchoate rights, because ecology is busily working for or looking to what's going to happen to those rights that are set that jurisdictions such as Millwood, City of Spokane have on paper but have not put to beneficial use yet. And unless we can defend how we're going to, unless we need that starting point to know what we need to be doing to have water for all of us for growth. So I would say 5% is a great starting point. And I think this body needs to be ready to consider more if we find that the effort needs to be more. Because water is, we can have all the land we want, but if we can't get water, it's not going to help. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I know we've had a lot of complications over this in the Northeast Public Development Authority as well, in determining, you know, who are the purveyors and who has the rights and all those questions. So to me, this is something that definitely makes a lot of sense that we would do a study.
And that's a really good example. There are 3 known purveyors and 1 zombie purveyor all in that area. And so how does something happen? If what I'm hearing is at least a consensus to pursue this, and what we would do is put that together in more of a partnership and bring that back to you, maybe the first or second meeting of 2020. Yeah, thank you. Just jumping ahead.
Yeah, please go ahead.
The climate resiliency element of our comp plan efforts. We all know this is new for 26. It is a massive lift. None of us have been through something like this before, or at least not in Spokane County or Washington. And through the efforts of Brett at Cheney, who I think I saw in our list of attendees today, he made a suggestion early on that the county and at least the smaller cities partner in this element, so that the smaller cities that may not have even staff capacity to work on this, let alone hire consultants, could come under an umbrella with the county administering this. Spencer Gardner and I talked about the city and county participating, and we agreed that was a good idea because, of course, the climate issues don't stop at municipal boundaries anyway. But we also realized that between the city and county, and even the city of the valley and the county, the time it would take to put together an interlocal agreement on defining who's doing what and all those pieces, we all know takes a very long time for our organizations. And the grant application materials are due next week. And so Brett has taken the lead at partnering with the smaller cities to produce letters of support, so to speak, for this county model. And we will be submitting those. But what we agreed to with the cities was that at the very least we would share scopes of work, so that we understand where we're trying to be complementary in doing these things, even where we may have some specific needs that are unique. But what we would pursue as we move into the 24 and 26 cycle is perhaps, if we don't have a formal ILA between the bigger governmental entities here, we can do it more informally with the small ones. Perhaps we can create a unified request for proposal and hire a single or hire common subject matter experts, so we also don't end up with dueling consultants that we're both paying to do the same things. So we're trying to essentially turn this into a pretty direct partnership. And again, we're not looking for action from the steering committee, mostly just a nodding head if you support this, if you think it's a good idea, or if you have other suggestions. And I'm not sure if Brett is still there. He may want to jump in, not to put him on the spot, but again, we give him credit for bringing this basic idea to us from the smaller community, because it seems that the county does have the capacity to help those smaller communities in particular. Amber.
So what is the process that Commerce allocates funds for the climate and resiliency element? I know what the county was looking to receive to help us pay for.
Yes.
But is there allocations for each large city as well?
I'll let Scott handle that.
Thank you, Scott Victor, Department of Commerce. I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but each city and each county was allocated to some formula, a certain amount to spend on this climate work. And the source of the funding allows us to roll that over from year to year. This application period is open right now, and it's coming up here shortly. But there will be an opportunity next year to also apply, and the year after. If you don't use all of it this year, then that money you don't use in your formulaic allocation will roll over to the next year. So absent of some legislative sweep of funds, if we have a big downturn or something like that, we should have this money available.
So then can the county apply and have other small cities alongside it and receive those funds as well?
Yeah, we would encourage that if there's a way to maximize the the capacity of the county to get those funds and work in coordination with the cities, certainly.
And as I said, the initial application period for this is due on the 31st. Our target date is Friday, the 27th.
And so no formal agreement, but you're saying that the goal would just be to kind of collaborate, share information, and hopefully maybe at the end we're somewhat aligned in what this looks like.
I think that's an accurate statement. We feel we don't necessarily need a formal contract with the smaller cities. We recognize that that's a better or a more desirable outcome for the larger cities to have their local agreement that the legislative authorities can sign off on. And that could still happen. But in this case, we were just looking for, can we put together at least a handshake agreement to get in line for the application date? Again, we may have a chance to have that more formal partnership by the time we get around to doing the actual work.
Well, I'm in support because I think at the end of the day, some of these can have some pretty significant competitiveness, impacts on all of our jurisdictions. And if we all just work together and have something that kind of is somewhat aligned, I think that would actually really benefit all of us.
At the very least, we wouldn't have contradictions.
Yes.
So just to clarify what you were saying, so the county's planning on applying, maybe with some other small cities alongside.
Yes.
And then the city of the Valley and the city of Spokane will also apply for their allocations. And what you're suggesting is, as we move forward with potentially selecting contractors or folks to help us develop the data for this chapter, we might want to go in on that together.
I think that's a prudent approach. There's no point in having multiple subject matter experts studying the exact same thing and paying them multiple fees when we can combine and do that in one pot of money.
I think it would be a good opportunity. The first step is just getting the money.
You have to get in line before you can move forward. And like I said, this is today, this is now a short deadline. We've been working on that application for about a month, and we'll be wrapping it up next week.
And so Amber kept looking at me from the city of Spokane Valley's response.
I kept looking over here.
I would just say that we haven't had any discussion on council, so I can't speak for council. But I do hear from our technical guys that we're planning to apply next year. Now, what we do once we've applied for is going to be up to council's direction. And I don't have that in my back hip pocket at the moment.
There's a lot of fluidity in working with Scott and the folks at Commerce. This is new to everybody. So there's not a firm methodology. You must hit these 12 benchmarks to make this happen. We're all finding our way through this forest together. But it's also clear, because there's going to be a significant scientific and technical aspect to this, our planning staffs are not built that way. You know, we're not built to be climate scientists, so we're gonna have to have that outside subject matter expert to help all of us.
I understand that. Let's see that, I should say.
We will proceed accordingly. Thank you for your thoughts and issues.
Did you want to do OFM or who?
That's big. Are we gonna do that or was you gonna do it?
I think I'm doing it.
Awesome.
I'm gonna put you to use.
I know.
No offense. I'll take care of yourself.
Well, good morning, everybody. Chaz Bates, I'm planning manager for the city of Spokane Valley. And I'm the PTEC member that raised my hand to draft up this memo. So I get to present it to you guys for discussion purposes. Essentially what we're doing here is we're going to advise the steering committee to adopt the OFM's population projection for 2046 at the medium rate. Before I get into the reasons why, I kind of describe a little bit about, can you give us a refresher about where we're at? As I mentioned, the Spokane County commissioners are tasked or required to adopt a population projection from OFM, somewhere between the low and medium range. By our interlocal agreement, this body, steering committee of elected officials, is tasked with making a recommendation to that body. OFM does these projections every 5 years. The most recent projection comes from 2022. If they're doing math correctly, that means the next one would be 2027, which puts us 1 year beyond our required update to Spokane County. So we will be using this 2022 OFM number to kind of move forward. Table 1 in the memo, and I don't have any slides, so I apologize for that, but I think it was pretty straightforward. Table 1 shares OFM's low, medium, high population projections for Spokane County for 2046. And as I mentioned, the PTAC is advising the steering committee of elected officials to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners to select the median projection. And we're doing this for 4 big basic reasons that are outlined in the memo I'll highlight here. The first one is that the 2022 OFM projection is kind of more recent than the previous OFM, excuse me. The recent OFM projection from 2022 incorporates kind of the robust growth that we all seen in the last 7 to 5 years in our area. So if you look at the chart in figure 1 in the back of the memo, you can see that that trend line and the population projection got pushed up, and that trend kind of follows the new kind of robust numbers that we've experienced in the last 5 to 7 years. Secondarily, recent changes in the Growth Management Act, as Scott mentioned, looks like he's stepped out for a second. We are required to review and periodically update every 5 years or produce an implementation progress report. So we believe that actually provides us in this body and everybody in the region to be able to respond more quickly to changes in demographics or population changes. And third, capital facilities planning. I think this is August to the planners, but just to be aware, we don't want to overcommit ourselves to planning capital facilities with a too high population number, because we do have to find out how to plan for it and finance those improvements. And we don't want to be too low, because then we'll be overstretch our capacity. We won't be able to accommodate the growth. Which leads to, of course, different increases across the board. And finally, other changes in the GMA is related to House Bill 1220 and housing. I think you heard brief mention, Kevin mentioned that not only are we now encouraged to accommodate population, but we actually have to plan for different population income brackets for housing. And so every jurisdiction is going to have the heavy lift of making sure that we have housing available for the very low, 0 to 30%, the medium, or the moderate, 50 to 80 and above, and including emergency shelters and emergency housing. So like similar to capital facilities, we don't want to overshoot what that means for us, because we will have to make sure that we have planned for that additional growth in those different income brackets, or too low, make sure that we have enough. With that, I think it's pretty straightforward. And this is discussion purposes. I'm happy to answer questions or comments.
Questions? Anyone out there with questions? Mr. French.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to inform the committee in 2021, the New York Times published a report that talked about the impacts of climate migration. And it's not about whether you believe in climate change or not. It's about how climate has impacted where people are moving to, where they are moving from. And so you can Google it and pull up the article, and I would encourage you to do so because it's pretty informative. And when we look at what has happened in Spokane County over the last 4 to 5 years with regard to the influx, a lot of that can be attributed to some of the impacts that are being experienced in Southern California and Arizona and Texas, and how that has resulted in a shift for more and more folks to look to the Northwest as a relocation destination. And one of those is water, obviously, and we've all seen and saw those reports. So I would just encourage you to look at that. I'm not campaigning for a bigger number or smaller number or anything. All I'm trying to do is share information that might help inform us as we go through this process. I don't want to overshoot the number. I don't want to undershoot the number. Don't have a crystal ball that tells me what exactly the number is, but certainly want to have information that would help inform a good decision. So thank you.
Ms. Walker.
When we were hearing about the 5-year update from Scott, does those 5-year updates allow us to review the population projection and see if we are still in line with it and make adjustments?
Yeah, my understanding is yes.
Okay.
I'm looking at Scott to confirm that.
That was the idea behind having more frequent check-ins, right? To make sure we're adjusting in a more flexible, proactive manner. Great word. There you go. So, okay, just wondering if that was allowed.
Yeah, and I might even put the spin on it. Not only is it allowed, I think it's actually required of us to kind of make sure that we're achieving our housing targets.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that brings us, so that was both them projections, and then we have the county population allocation methodology. Is that it too?
Nothing really to report on that, other than that the PTAC that's the next step that we're doing. We're kind of asking, discussion purposes to look at that and working more with that discussion.
Okay, so we'll consider that item on the agenda addressed. The last is tribal participation. Looking for some head nods or other thoughts. This body does have a requirement, correct, to offer.
There's in recent legislation, area counties and organizations are required to offer participation to the tribes. The tribes currently participate at the PTAC level, but as at the steering committee level, there's no formal connection yet.
So just some head nods to offer to the tribes that are currently participating in the PTAC a position to sit at this table and participate at the steering committee level. Mr. Cathcart.
Would they decide amongst themselves who would be that representative?
I think it's up to this group to decide if that's going to be a single shared seat or whether that would go to each of the Spokane and Kalispell to create 2 seats. I think that's your call.
So is the ex officio members or are they voting members?
I think that's your call too.
So I guess what it is we kind of need to get this on the table. And so at our meeting in January, we will make this an action item and with some ideas on thoughts to put together something more formal to the tribes. I'm sure that from my understanding, we have lots of different perspectives on these boards or on with these groups as to how we offer tribal membership. At the Board of Health, there is 1 seat that the tribes themselves are supposed to make a determination on that. I could say that for those of us who sit on the Board of Health, we know that the tribes have not filled that role. We do know that SRTC, we extended membership to the tribes on individual basis. So it's just, and those members did accept that, whether or not they regularly participate in meetings is up to them at that point. But I guess it would be some feedback from this group on, we've obviously done things in Spokane County different ways. If there are thoughts as to how we want to approach that as a group, this is not advocating from a personal position or anything. This is just saying that in order to be in compliance as a group, we need to elevate this to some level of consideration and decision. Mr. Woodard.
Well, I would, rather than have the tribes fighting between themselves, I would suggest that we consider having both tribes represented as ex officio. And that way they can participate if they like, they can not participate, but at least we'll know what their views and whatnot are if they participate. And we can always change the ex official position at some point in time in the future. A future board can do that in the event that they get real active with us. I'd like to encourage them to be heard for sure. And I think that's an equitable, I hate that word, but that's an equal opportunity for them. Let's go to the equal part.
Other thoughts? We have Ms. Stratton. We'll go to Ms. Stratton first.
I was just going to mention, I've worked with a lot of the tribes on projects in Spokane. So if anybody needs help connecting, I'm happy to do that. I will tell you though, I've had very good luck in the past with contacting one tribe and asking them to reach out to another tribe if we want to work with another tribe. And usually they're very welcoming for that opportunity and they get along well. And I think it's just, reaching out to the right people to see, what we can coordinate with them. So I'm happy to help if anybody needs it.
Thank you. Other comments from individuals? There, Commissioner Walber.
Would it be possible to send out the most recent, is it an RCW or is there a change that, can we send that out just to see what the spirit of that was? So then I could give better feedback as to, how many seats or what the participation is, expected.
And we'll add to that any legal interpretation that we have from our council.
Okay. I wasn't aware of news, so I'm glad it was brought forward, and I think we should look at that and, include the tribes in this group. And I guess I just need more information about how the state, suggested that.
Yeah, thanks. Scott Cook again with Commerce. We have a tribal planner, liaison planner that presented to this body a while back. So we'll have more, we'll refresh the information. The other thing is the PTAC is actually working on some staff level conversations about how this might occur. So we're going to schedule some meetings or at least a meeting to start the conversation, but we'll have more information for you and probably some recommendations on moving forward.
Thank you. So just want to get this out in front of the group that we need to be prepared to consider this. And so I guess we'll get that information out to the group, the RCW, and then at our January meeting, we can have further discussion on this. So thank you very much. Any other questions on this? Any other comments? If not, we'll move on to our last item, which is the 2024 legislative issues.
We put that on the agenda just to see if there were any common issues. All of us in our individual roles have our lobbying and agendas. The one thing that we are working on with the last legislative session, Spokane and King counties partnered to clarify language for capital facilities planning. We're continuing that role. In this case, the effort is to define what is a capital facility that relates to growth and development. Because right now the statute is not clear on that, and court interpretations are that it involves every publicly owned capital facility in the county, whether the county controls it or not. And that's an untenable position. We were able to clarify that in the last session to some degree, only in that sense that, as we talk with school districts, fire districts and others, they plan in a different world than the GMA plan. And if we can't align those, now the county is no longer held in, out of compliance, whereas before we could have been. So we've clarified that relationship, but this next one would be, you know, do we need to count salt sheds, or what's really necessary for growth? We're trying to define that definition a little better. And then again, we'll be partnering with King County and frankly, I think others through the American Planning Association legislative chapter and probably WASAC as well. This is a clarification that every county, every city needs, because otherwise we're all at risk of this incredibly broad definition that we can almost never get our arms around. So that's the one thing that we've got going. And I realize by the time this group meets again in January, the legislature will be well underway. So I don't know that there's anything new from a steering committee perspective. I wanted to let you know on that side of the one that we want to move forward.
Any comments?
It's a real quick question in regards to that. So, as you say, you want to be able to define that. Is that something that you will include fire districts and school districts to, or is the conversations we've had in regards to level of service? Yeah, going to be the guiding.
Yeah, absolutely. What we learned in this last year or two as we updated that county CFP that was found deficient back in 2016-17 is that school districts plan in a different way, fire districts plan in a different way. Now that we've kind of made those connections, you know, we look at that as being a good planning connection just for discussing growth and how the organizations manage that growth. But at least now there's a legislative line that says we don't have to force the apple and the orange into the same box before we can take a CFP forward. Okay? But the definitions part would be from our perspective, not so much from your perspective. It's what is Spokane County capital facilities look like as they relate to growth. And that's the caveat for GMA. There are plenty of capital facilities that have almost no relationship to growth. And we have 12 or 13 courtrooms. Is that ever going to change? Well, we get to be 1 million people, maybe it will. But in the meantime, roads, sewer, infrastructure all relate directly to growth. Those are the ones we are able to categorize, but it's this amorphous general county facilities thing that you can't get your arms around.
Yeah, I'm still trying to connect the dots in regards to how we plan as well. So our planning is separate from what the county is going to do. I know we do our own planning, but it's directly correlated to growth. Both of them
yes.
are.
And that is more directly related to the concurrency analysis issue. So when these comp plans are coming forward for the county that are outside of the city, we look at Meade and Cheney and Central Valley. Can you handle this? Can you handle this capacity? And you comment back, and we include those comments to our commissioners. Last year, the county changed the school concurrency into a direct concurrency rather than an indirect. Right. And what that means is essentially that the capacity must be demonstrated by the time somebody pulls building permits. We made it a stronger link than it had in the past. Sure. So that's how they come together there, not so much on the CFP side itself.
Sure. That helps. I know it does.
And the reason the CFP is problematic is you have to create levels of service. And you could do that on infrastructure. You know, you can, so many gallons per minute will fit in this pipe. Creating a level of service, for us to create a level of service for schools is to reach into your world and say, well, is it a square footage? Is it a teacher class or student relationship? You know, what's the level of service that you use versus what we would use? And then you have to be able to say that growth, the level of service will not be negatively affected if this growth happens. And it's better on our perspective if the schools are in that direct role, because then you can look at, all right, here's an actual subdivision. It's going to have 153 homes. They're going to be 3 or 4 bedroom homes that will generate this amount of kids. Right. Then you guys know what's coming, and that can happen at that time. But it's those levels of service that are really hard to put into the more amorphous parts of it for general county facilities. You know, how much square footage do we need in our facilities shop or our boiler room? You know, who knows? But that's what we're trying to narrow back down.
Ms. Walbert.
Well, I mean, I guess the hope is in this 26 update, though, that we have a better sense of how the county, you know, we're making plans, we're maybe not having as many amendments come forward in the future. So we actually know this area is going to develop more residentially and generate more students. And that hopefully we're not always reacting. We're going to be proactive with our school districts and fire districts so they can plan appropriately.
That's just it. In this last couple of years, by reaching out where the county really hadn't done that before, we've built more of these direct partnerships. We know who to call, we know who to talk to. And as 26 goes along, you know, that will be part of the planning team right from the beginning. We're, you know, it's simply the way it should be done.
Is police, is that also part of your planning in that process?
Yeah. Okay. And that, you know, again, levels of service, there's an urban level of service and a rural level of service. Sure. The UGA, and right now we use 1.1 officers per 1,000. In the rural area, it's much less. Sure. Because it has a different capacity. Sure.
I never want to appear argumentative, but there's very specific guidelines for how we plan as well, and those are quantifiable, not just, it doesn't change every day or every week or every year. It is contractual volumes and children and classrooms, which does come right down to square footage of buildings, and finding, you know, suitable pieces of real estate to be able to build that. I think really needs to be consideration with development as it's happening. Not, I mean, I know we have the concurrency thing now where we can look like the bad guy and say we can't manage this. Let's go out and pass a bond and build another school.
Right. Well, that's from the county's commitment. You know, we're committed to make that partnership work better. So that happens up front, as well as some better anticipation of what's the real development when this plat goes forward.
Ms. Waldron.
So what might be helpful is if you have some suggested changed language that you're talking about at the legislative level, just to share with this group, so that folks can review it and give feedback before, I don't know when our next meeting is, January here.
Yeah. Okay. We're working on that now.
Yes, we all are, right? That's our wish list for Olympia.
So any other comments on legislative issues? So the last item, I don't see any out there. So the last item on our agenda to see this morning, oh God, is public comment. Is there anyone who would like to avail themselves of this opportunity to make a comment to this group, either in person here in the audience or somewhere out in Zoom? See anyone? Yes, please.
Really quick, to end this on a positive note, I just want to congratulate the county on adopting a capital facilities plan that was enthusiastically supported by Commerce, by FutureWise, and by Mr. Paul Croft. So congratulations. Much improved and
celebrate.
Sets a good path moving forward. Thanks.
Thanks.
Anyone else? So seeing no public comment, it is 10:53 and we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for your participation today. See you in 2024.